Good afternoon. This is Chris with Congresswoman Susie Lee's team. I'd like to welcome everyone to Congresswoman Lee's telephone town hall. We have your Congresswoman on the line, who will be giving you an update on what's going on here in Washington, and she'll also be answering some of your questions. I'll be monitoring this call and helping all of you ask your questions. Just a reminder, if you do have your question chosen and we bring you online, please repeat your question for the Congresswoman so she can answer it. Also, we want to make sure questions are not too long tonight. We have a lot of people who want to answer questions, so please try to keep it just to one question. If you would like to ask a question, please press *3 at any point. So that's *3 to ask a question. And if you'd like to subscribe to Congresswoman Lee's newsletter, you can press *6. So *3 to ask a question and *6 to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter. You can also email questions to press.susielee@gmail.com. We'll also be asking for your participation in a series of live poll questions, so please stay on the line and stay tuned to cast your votes in our polls. Thank you all again for joining, and I'll now turn it over to Congresswoman Lee to share some opening remarks. Congresswoman?
Thank you, Chris. I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to dial in tonight, and I hope everyone had a wonderful Super Bowl. I am Congresswoman Susie Lee. I represent the southern portion of Las Vegas from Summerlin to Spring Valley, Enterprise, Silverado Ranch, Mountain's Edge, all the way down to Laughlin and Searchlight. Before we begin to get to your questions, I just want to briefly give you an update on what's been happening here in Washington. But please know that no matter what's going on here, my work does not stop, and neither does my team's. We are always here to help you with any issues that you might be facing. And so as a reminder, please press *3 to ask a question and *6 if you would like to subscribe to my email newsletter. And please stay on the line. We will be asking a few poll questions throughout the call and would love to hear your thoughts about issues that we are all facing. Now listen, there's been no shortage of news coming out of Washington. Generally, there's been a pattern where on a Friday afternoon or off the cuff, President Trump announces some executive action, generally that he does not have the legal authority to do. It's causing a wave of confusion and fear for many people across this country. We found that many of these actions have been blocked or walked back or put on hold in the court of law, but others have not. My team and I have been reaching out to thousands of Nevadans via phone, text, email, social media to understand just how these actions and orders have been impacting them. Many people have already felt the impact with their pocketbooks. One set of parents have 3 college-age students, and one of their children receives a scholarship from the National Institute of Health. But after an executive order, that funding was put on hold, and they were faced with a $22,000 bill for their daughter's graduate education that now has not been paid through the fellowship that she had been awarded. Those are the types of impacts that people are feeling across this country. We've also heard from Southern Nevadans that are worried that Trump's potential freeze on funding will stop experimental cancer treatments, which we've already seen, lost in jobs and health insurance, closed down health centers, ended medical residencies. We've already seen some residencies pulled back here in Southern Nevada, and resulted in veterans health care providers being understaffed. But let me be clear. We have 3 bodies of the federal government, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. There is a checks and balances, and it is illegal for the executive office to freeze federal investments that were signed into law by the legislative branch. And now we see that these freezes are being fought in the court of law. And the reason, basically Congress has the power of the purse. That is our fundamental legislative duty. And we are seeing that this duty and these basic core of our Constitution are being ridden by this executive branch. And so we are taking every step we can to continue to fight these actions in court. Many of them have been stayed. Many are waiting decisions. And we'll continue to keep you updated as things progress here. But I just want to make clear that, the president came into office promising to lower costs and to make people's lives safer. And what we are seeing is these actions are actually increasing costs for working Americans and not making us any safer. And remember, we have a funding cliff that we need to meet on March 14th. There is a threat of a government shutdown if we do not pass a funding bill. There's also this move to extend tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. And we know that in order to be able to provide these tax cuts, that many things will be cut. Many programs will be cut, whether we're talking about Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. And listen, I'm all for reviewing government spending to save taxpayer dollars. Our government should be more efficient. But when you come in and you blanket freeze agencies across this government, you prevent workers from showing up to work. It prevents people from providing services to Americans that we rely on. And, we know that there's one person at the center of this, and his name is Elon Musk. And he is not under review. It's a reckless way to run the government or a business for that matter. These are unprecedented times, and the White House is certainly testing the limits of the Constitution. But I just want to make clear that nothing that this administration has done so far will bring down the cost of housing or groceries or make us any safer. In fact, we know that many of the tariffs that were announced today will actually increase prices for working Americans. In fact, the National Association of Home Builders said that tariffs on building materials, steel, and aluminum will increase the cost of construction, and it will be consumers who end up paying for the cost of tariffs in the form of higher prices. We know that freezing federal funds will cause families, seniors, veterans, and the sick to suffer. Trump and Republicans have signaled that they plan to cut Medicaid. What does that mean in Nevada? Over 800,000 people in our state were enrolled in Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program. Medicaid provides health insurance to 1 in 6 adults aged 19 to 64, 3 in 8 children in Nevada, and 4 in 7 seniors living in nursing homes, and 1 in 3 people with disabilities. Let's be clear, not only will this make life more expensive for thousands of Nevadans and millions of Americans, it will put lives at risk. In the past weeks across the country, there have been reports of Medicaid payment portals being shut down. Now the courts have been stopping many of these orders. The funding freeze was blocked in the courts. The resignation offer for federal workers has been blocked in the courts. Trump's ban on birthright citizenship was also blocked. And courts have blocked Elon Musk and Doge from accessing Treasury Department records that contain sensitive personal information. This was a preliminary injunction after 19 Democratic attorney generals sued President Trump. It said that anyone prohibited from having access to this sensitive information since January 20th must immediately destroy all copies of materials downloaded from the Treasury Department. Now, this hearing is set for this Friday, February 14th. But we know also that Doge and Elon Musk are targeting the Department of Education. This is something that is near and dear to my heart, having spent my career before Congress helping our most at-risk students graduate from high school. What does this mean? Over 280,000 Nevada students will see their school lunch discontinued. It could pause federal funding for special education programs for 67,000 Nevada students. Now, I'm sure that many of you have been hearing about Musk and his Doge team gaining access to data, but this is wrong for so many reasons. But I want you to understand who Elon Musk is. He is a government contractor. He does not have clearance to have your most sensitive information. He owns one of the largest social media platforms, is the world's richest person at $433 billion. And let me be clear, he gave over $280 million to Donald Trump to help get him elected. And his role in the Trump administration is an enormous conflict of interest. Let's remember, two of his companies, SpaceX and Tesla, have received $20 billion in government contracts. The largest customer and investors in his companies is the federal government. It seems like a good return on investment if you ask me. Not to mention his dangerous connections to China. This is a country that has stolen sensitive information from America. His Tesla factory in Shanghai was financed with $1.4 billion in loans from China, and China has given Tesla favorable loans and a discounted corporate tax rate. So my point is this is not someone who should have any role in running our government or access to Americans' most private information. That's why I sponsored the Taxpayer Data Protection Act to protect Americans' private data from being compromised. But listen, we also have to remember here in Washington, Republicans control the White House, they control the Senate, and they control the House of Representatives. So in order for us to pass any piece of legislation that will be a check on Elon Musk and Doge and access to your most personal and private information, we need just 3 Republicans to step up and help us sponsor these bills. So we have a lot of work to do. I know people have many, many questions out there. I want to thank you for joining, and as a reminder, please press star 3 to ask a question and press star 6 to subscribe to my email newsletter. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chris.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Like the Congresswoman said, just please press star 3 to ask a question. But before we get to questions, just a very quick poll that we want to do. So the first poll question is, are you affected by any of Trump's federal funding freezes? So please press 1 for yes. Please press 2 for no. Again, that's, are you affected by any of Trump's federal funding freezes? Press 1 for yes. Press 2 for no. I'm just going to give it, a couple seconds for you guys to answer, and then I'll jump back in and we'll move into questions. All right, let's get to our first question. We're going to unmute Donald from Las Vegas. Sorry, just give me one moment. Hi, Donald, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Donald. Thank you so much. I saw you have a question regarding high-speed rail. You have the Congresswoman. If you could just repeat it, and then she'll answer your question.
Thank you. Good evening, Senator. Thank you for taking my question. My question is, what is the status of the high-speed rail job that is going from Nevada down to Southern California? Has it been a victim of the Doge effort, or is it still ongoing? Because I live in that general area, and I no longer see those workers out there.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Donald. This has been a major concern for me. For those on the call, Brightline West is the nation's first high-speed rail connecting Las Vegas to Southern California. For anyone who's driven on the I-15, particularly on a weekend, knows how important it is for us to, for our economy to get cars off the highway, to get people here via this high-speed rail. It was a $3 trillion investment by the federal government, creating 35,000 jobs in southern Nevada. But right now, its future in these orders is unclear. Trump froze the bipartisan infrastructure law. Judges blocked him from moving forward with that freeze. The funding freeze should have ended, and the Trump administration must abide by the court's ruling. So this is the type of overreach that we're going to continue to fight back against. This type of, again, Congress has the power of the purse. This was a bill that was passed by Congress. The money was appropriated by Congress. So we are continuing to monitor this situation, but at this point, the project should be moving forward, but we'll keep you all apprised of that as things develop.
Great. Let's now move on to our second poll question. It's on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least concerned and 5 being the most concerned. How concerned are you that Elon Musk and Doge have access to your private information? On a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the least concerned and 5 being the most concerned, how concerned are you that Elon Musk and Doge have access to your private information? Give everyone a quick second before we move on to our next question. All right. Okay, let's move on to our next question. We have Christopher. Christopher, we're going to take you live. Hey, Christopher, can you hear us?
If you're referring to me, yes.
Hey, Christopher, you're on with the Congresswoman. We saw you had a question about solar projects. Would you mind just repeating it for the Congresswoman?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to thank you for this process. It's very enlightening, and I didn't realize that the light rail project, the train to LA, was on hold, so that's discouraging. But I did get a notice from the group Vote Solar today that a lot of the funding for solar projects around the country is also put on hold, and of course they're very concerned. They work with many states and legislatures for solar projects, and a lot of the funding has been withdrawn. And I don't know what's happening in Nevada as far as that goes.
Yeah, Christopher, thanks for that question. First of all, I want to clarify that the Brightline West high-speed rail project is not on hold. There was an attempt to shut it down with this freeze. The block was blocked through a court order, and so it is progressing. That's not to say that there will not be other attempts by this administration to roll back legislation that has been passed, but at this point, it is not paused. I do want to say, with respect to solar, that has been a big target of this administration, to go after any type of law that was passed to promote renewable energy and electric vehicles. We saw that Trump tried to freeze $156 million in federal investments that was supposed to support solar, residential solar projects to help lower costs for families. Workers were not able to access those funds. However, this goes to show that the greatest power we have in this country is each of us in our own voice in continuing to speak up and put pressure when we know something is happening that is wrong. And we put pressure on the Trump administration and the EPA to reverse the course. And it appears that they did, and people can now access these funds. The courts ruled that this freeze cannot occur, so we continue to be in touch with our state and local organizations that are receiving these fundings. Now, again, this seems to be the MO of this administration, to try to block any piece of legislation that was passed by the previous administration, but we know that we have the power of the purse, and we have the courts as our, last line of defense. And all efforts are being used to push back against this administration, and we are being successful at doing that. And this rollback of the freeze on solar is an example of that.
All right, let's move on to another poll question. Number 3 is, which types of government programs do you think should be made more efficient? Press 1 for Social Security and Medicare. Press 2 for nutrition assistance programs. Press 3 for defense funding. Press 4 for funding for climate change. Press 5 for no programs. Press 6 for other programs. Again, which types of government programs do you think should be made more efficient? Press 1 for Social Security and Medicare. Press 2 for nutrition assistance programs. Press 3 for defense funding. Press 4 for funding to combat climate change. Press 5 for no programs. Press 6 for other programs. All right, we're going to move on to our next question here. It's going to be Deborah. Deborah, we're going to take you live. Just give me one moment.
Hi.
Hi, Deborah. Can you hear us?
I can.
Hey, Deborah. Thank you so much for calling in. We saw you had a question about loan forgiveness. Would you mind asking that to the Congresswoman? Thank you.
Sure. I have a couple of things that I wanted to ask. One is public service loan forgiveness. For those people that have had their loans forgiven, is there any fear that Donald Trump can go and reverse that? Number 2, he's made comments in the recent past about not listening to federal judges when they rule against him, because he says that they're not allowed to go against the executive orders and the executive branch. Any fear that he will just simply ignore orders? And 3, what do Democrats have planned to get rid of Musk?
Well, thank you for that question. With respect, first of all, let me address the public service loan forgiveness program, which is such an important program that was set up to encourage people to go into public service jobs. If your loan has already been forgiven, I find it very hard for the Trump administration to come back and reverse that forgiveness. That being said, the president has made it clear that he wants to eliminate the Department of Education. That the public service loan forgiveness program is administered through the Department of Education. So I anticipate that should he, do what he's done before, which is go into buildings, prevent workers from shut down the buildings, shut off workers from accessing their computers. That's what I anticipate he's going to do to the Department of Education, which is going to be incredibly hurtful to millions of Americans in Nevadans. And so, moving forward, I think that program could be in danger for anyone who's in the middle of it because of these types of actions. But let's remember what the Department of Education means for the state of Nevada. School lunches. We get over $130 million a year in school lunches. Our higher education system, student loans, $97 million for special ed. And so all of these programs are incredibly important and are important to families, and they are administered by the Department of Education. So, again, we're going to do what we've continued to do, which is, hold up our Constitution. And, yes, Donald Trump says he's not listening to judges. That being said, we have a Supreme Court, we have a judicial system, and, Americans have to speak up and make sure that, not just Democrats, but Republicans who, let me remind everyone, they control the Senate and they control the House of Representatives, have got to stand up as well to this administration, and including the Supreme Court. And so we're going to continue to do everything at our disposal to fight these actions. Many of these court cases have been filed by outside agencies, the AFL-CIO, several unions, state attorney generals, including Aaron Ford from the state of Nevada, filed the lawsuit that blocked the freeze on federal funding. And so we are going to mobilize at every stage that we can, because this has been an attack on our Constitution, and we'll continue to fight this.
Thank you, Deborah. So we're going to move on to our next question. We have Jamie from West Charleston. It's going to be, all right, let's see. Jamie, hi, Jamie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Jamie. You have the Congresswoman on the line. Would you mind just sharing your question that you had about insulin pricing?
Yes, I am concerned. I'm a 74-year-old senior who's lived in Nevada for 48 years since I was a young girl, retired school teacher, so I do have a state pension. During Trump's administration, my insulin costs and my other medications were almost $700 a month. Once the bill was passed for the $35 max on my insulin, it means only $105 a month for my 3 different insulins. So I'm being very, very seriously impacted by finances, especially medical, which I can't do anything about. So I don't know if you have an answer to the question, Susie, but do we know that they can now go back to the pre-Trump prices for my insulin? Is that what's probably going to happen? Or is there a way?
Yeah, Jamie, thank you. Thank you for that question. This is such an important issue that affects millions of Americans. Many people like yourself who are on a fixed income, who literally were being buried by the cost of prescription drug prices and insulin. Now listen, the president has put the Inflation Reduction Act in his sight. This was the bill that was passed that included the provision to cap insulin drug prices at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. That bill is still the law of the land today. He has not been able to repeal it, but I'm going to say it's in his sights. Now, this is what is happening here in Washington. There's 2 things. Right now, Republicans are trying to pass a bill. We call it a reconciliation bill. All it means is they can do this by having a simple majority in both the House and the Senate. And what they are trying to do is to pass this bill that will extend tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. And they want to provide about $2 to $4 trillion in savings so that they can pass these tax cuts on to the wealthiest Americans. In order to get that savings, they have to cut programs that Americans rely on, like Medicare, like Medicaid, and like Social Security. So that is what is at risk of being cut here in the next few months as the Republicans attempt to pass this reconciliation bill, which basically will include 2 things: tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans and cutting programs that millions of our neediest Americans rely on, like yourself. And so that's when Americans need to step up and express their outrage and hold our Republican counterparts accountable. We have all got to stand up to protect these important programs that, by the way, millions of Americans have paid into. And so we're going to continue to fight this, but I just want you to know that this is the grand plan by Trump and Republicans.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. We're going to do another poll question now, and then we'll get to a few more questions. So, the fourth question is, how do you get your information from government officials? Press 1 for social media, press 2 for TV, press 3 for mail, press 4 for government websites, press 5 for friends and family. Again, that's how do you get your information from government officials? Press 1 for social media, press 2 for TV, press 3 for mail, press 4 for government websites, press 5 for friends and family. All right, we'll give you guys a couple seconds to fill this one out, and then we'll get to the rest of the questions. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question here. Okay, it looks like we have John, who we're gonna take live, although maybe, let's see. Hi, John, can you hear us? Is this John?
Are you speaking to me?
Hi, yes, Mark, is that you?
Yes. John
Hi,
is my husband.
Oh, I apologize.
Speaking of which, all of us who supposedly benefit from gender ideology, I put that in quotes, John is my husband, but that's not my question. We're clearly heading into a constitutional crisis. Any time now, it's going to be clear that they're going to defy the courts. And the Congresswoman, you've referred to that several times. What is the Democratic caucus going to do to put some weight behind this constitutional crisis?
Listen, John, thank you for that question. And, I think that everyone in this country is alarmed at what they are seeing. The challenge is to our constitutional norms again and again. But I will tell you that we have continued to hold up and bring lawsuits and put pressure on, and we will pass bills in Congress and continue to put it. But most importantly, I can't stress this enough, that Democrats are fighting this tooth and nail. We have blocked the ban to birthright citizenship. We have blocked the freeze on federal grants and loans. We have blocked the resignation offer for federal workers. We have continued to fight on the ban on asylum, on expanding, removing employment protections for civil servants. So we will continue to work together, but this is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and not only does the Democratic caucus need to fight this, but the Republican caucus does as well. As you know, the Republicans are in control in the House and the Senate, and their constitutional rights are being ripped away as well. And so I say to everyone on this call, as much as you call my office and put pressure on me, and I will continue to fight every single day to make sure that we protect our democracy, we need to do that for all members of Congress. And we're going to continue to work with our state attorneys general, making sure that we're filing lawsuits and continuing to block. And ultimately, we're going to hold our Supreme Court accountable. And I know people are worried about the Supreme Court. However, we have seen them stand up to this type of lawlessness, and we'll continue to fight these actions again and again.
All right, thank you, Mark. All right, we have an email question from Jen from Summerlin. She says, will Donald Trump's federal freeze apply to students' free and reduced lunches? My youngest son still relies on this for food every day. Congresswoman, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so as I've said, we fought the freeze, and we have been successful at lifting the freeze. That being said, remember, this president wants to eliminate the Department of Education. And one of the key programs that the Department of Education administers is funding for free and reduced lunch, the National School Lunch Program. There's about almost 300,000 students in Nevada who rely on that program like your son. And so we're going to continue to fight to support this funding and to support this program and to fight these lawless actions of tearing down. You know, we passed a bill that provides funding for school lunches. And we will continue to stand up to make sure that Congress's funding, that we appropriate and we pass the funding. That being said, I want everyone to understand that, you know, people think it's a cute idea to get rid of the Department of Education, to send everything to the states. Well, the state of Nevada receives millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to support programs like special ed, like, you know, student loan programs, like school lunches. And so all of that funding is under attack. And why? Because let's trace it back to what the plan is. The plan is to pass a bill that will make these types of cuts for millions of Americans like you and your son, so that people like Elon Musk and the wealthiest Americans can get massive tax breaks. And so, you know, as we look, I mean, listen, we know that inflation is killing us. We know that the cost of housing is going up, the cost of groceries are going up, but nothing that this administration has done is bringing down the cost. And in fact, it's going to hurt families like yours. So we're going to continue to fight all this tooth and nail, but I just want you to be wide-eyed about the plans to repeal or eliminate the Department of Education.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have another email question. It's from Robert in Spring Valley. I think it's what a lot of us have on our minds with all of this talk of tariffs when it comes to Mexico and China and Canada. So Robert says, you know, he's worried that these tariffs are going to have an effect on his small business and making lives more expensive. Do these tariffs affect us in Nevada, or is it just other places? Congresswoman, you want to take Robert's question?
Robert, thank you for that question. One, as a small business owner, I also, you know, want to highlight that the Trump administration is, you know, setting its sights on the Small Business Administration. You know, in 2024, we had almost $500 million in loans go out to small businesses here in Nevada. That would be one of the programs that would be impacted by his proposed funding freeze. But let's go back to tariffs. Now listen, tariffs are a tool that the government has to try to even out trade imbalances. And so they're most effective when they are done very specifically. But this president came out and tried to impose across-the-board tariffs on our closest trading partners and allies, Canada and Mexico, and then China. He has now come out and imposed a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel. The intended purpose of this is to obviously make it more expensive to import steel and aluminum from our trading partners, and eventually will lead to more manufacturing of steel and aluminum in the United States of America. That's the ultimate goal. But what will happen is, because it is across the board, what we are going to see is prices go up on appliances, on smartphones, on anything built with steel, on anything built with aluminum. So to the extent that your small businesses relies on those types of inputs, you will potentially see your cost of doing business go up. And so, you know, these are tariffs that the president believes that he's going to raise money by imposing tariffs. But what tariffs do, they are put on manufacturers, and manufacturers then pass those tariffs down to consumers. So instead of bringing down the cost for working Americans, his policies are actually increasing your costs.
All right, thank you, Congresswoman. We have another phone call. It's from Lonnie Paz. We're gonna take you live here. It's on misinformation and what folks can do. Hey, Lonnie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hey, Congresswoman Lee. It's Lonnie with the Red Rock Dems. I have two questions for you. Mis and disinformation are topics that our club has been focused on. People want to know where to go to get news. Should it be from print media, not social media? What do you recommend that people read to learn about what's happening? There's so much misinformation out there, no one knows what to trust. Second question is, what can the grassroots do to help you and all of our elected officials stand strong and help correct our country's movement and put it back on track?
Thank you, Lonnie, for that question. Listen, misinformation and disinformation, we know, has been a problem in this country and is continuing. With influence in our elections, you see it on all forms of social media. My advice to anyone would be, if you read something or hear something that just, doesn't seem, even if it does seem to pass the smell test, get multiple sources of information. Fact check it. Go to different, if you get something off of a far left, source of information, go check it on a far right one, or go check it with a reputable news source. Just make sure you are checking your information and not taking everything at face value. And with respect to what can you do, as I said, first and foremost, we have received thousands and thousands of emails, of text messages, of phone calls, of people telling us their stories on how they have been impacted. I need that information because that is the power I have from hearing from my constituents is what I can use to fight back. And listen, let's be clear. Donald Trump won Nevada, okay? He was elected with a majority of the vote in Nevada. We are going to continue to put pressure on Republicans in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, and in our state to stand up for the rule of law, to make sure that they're standing up to do what they promised to do. And that was to bring down the cost of living and increase safety for Americans. And what we are seeing time and again, just today, for example, the president went to shutter the Consumer Protection Bureau. This is the bureau that was instrumental, in bringing down overdraft fees. For years and years, banks and credit card agencies made billions of dollars charging our poorest Americans who, maybe fell on hard times, missed a payment, were late on a payment. Then they'd rack up a $35 bank fee for a late, payment, or for insufficient funds, or for a late credit card payment up to $32. The Consumer Protection Bureau got those fees down to $5 and $8. This is a president that wants to eliminate that program that was so instrumental in bringing down costs to Americans. And so we need your stories, we need you to stand up, and we need you to mobilize, not just in Democrat representative districts, but across this country. And I remind people again, Republicans are in control of the House and they're in control of the Senate. If I write a bill, for example, that protects taxpayer private information, it will not get to the floor of the House unless I get 3 Republicans to join all the Democrats to sign on to that bill. I have to believe that in the House of Representatives, out of 218 Republicans, there are 3 Republicans who are going to stand up for working Americans. We need to find them. And so we need you to organize, not just with us, but across this country, in calling all representatives, not just Democrats, but Republicans too, so that they stand up to the rule of law and protect our Constitution.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight and called in to share your questions. I hope you all have a good night. Congresswoman, if you have any final thoughts that you want to share, just to close out.
Yeah, now listen, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to call in. Please continue to email and call our offices to tell us the stories of how you're being impacted, but also to speak up across this country. If you have relatives, friends who live in other congressional districts, make sure that they're calling their representatives as well, because the most important person that I represent is my constituent, and that is the most important phone call I receive every day, and most members of Congress feel the same way. I'm just going to say these are unprecedented times, and the goal of this president is to unleash a flurry of illegal actions to confuse and to incite fear in this country. And please know that we will not be intimidated and we will not back down. We are going to stand up for hardworking Americans. We are going to stand up to lower your costs, to continue to fight. This is a president who wants to, let's remember, pass tax cuts, cut between $2 trillion and $4 trillion out of Social Security, out of Medicare, out of Medicaid, for the sole reason of providing tax breaks to the likes of Elon Musk. It is not lost on me that Elon Musk donated over $288 million to President Trump's presidential election. He is now sitting next to him and calling for these cuts that are impacting hardworking Americans like you and me. And so that he can turn around to all of his wealthy buddies who were all sitting on the stage at the inauguration and reward them with tax cuts. We have the power. We know in this country that we have the power as Americans when we stand up, when we come together, and when we fight back. And we're going to take every action and use every route possible, legal, organizational-wise, legislatively. We are going to fight back to make sure that we protect not just our democracy, but democracies around the globe, and continue to make our country safer for all Americans. And so I know that you've taken the time to join this call. And let me be clear, I am for cutting government waste. But when you shut down agencies across the board that provide aid to millions of Americans, and by the way, that ends up being less efficient because you end up basically causing so much confusion that you're actually being more inefficient by doing that. But in any case, we're going to continue to fight any type of attempts that usurp congressionally, our delegated powers, every step of the way, but we need all of you to continue to do what you've been doing. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, please remember to email or call. Let us know how you are feeling these executive orders on the ground, and most importantly, continue to stay engaged. Thank you all, and have a good evening.